And as soon as we went live, he might have disappeared. Okay. Welcome back, Jason. All right. Somebody said here on the WhatsApp, those are the days when teachers were interested in students' well being. Those days, teachers used to be like children's mother. Teachers now are just there for the money. Agree? Disagree? How you feel about that one? You got to unmute them. Yeah.
Really interesting
Wait a minute. Sorry
observation,
about
I
that.
would say.
Agree? Disagree?
Really interesting observation. I don't know necessarily if you can make such a sweeping statement. I think that there are genuinely excellent teachers who are around who are supportive of the endeavors of their students, teachers who will go all out to make sure that their students do well. Of course, they're the odd ones who are in it for the wrong reasons. But I think teaching is one of the most important professions, and certainly, even though I'm an attorney at law, now I lecture at university level because I see value in education. I see the transformative impact that it can have. And certainly, I know that many of my friends, many of my colleagues who are teachers in St. Vincent are really inclined to do the very best for their students. So, yes, there are bad apples among the bunch, but I'd say that there are still very good teachers who are around us who want the very best for their students.
Okay. As you mentioned that, permit me to go off a little bit, right? You mentioned in one of the documents that you have sent to me that you are interested in change and development. What areas within our education system do you think needs improvement, or do you see um, as something to be added? What would you change if there's anything to change or improve or get rid of in our education system?
Yeah, well, I think there needs to be more equitable access for all students, no matter where they come from. If they are rural in origin, if they're urban in origin, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter that students
Mhm.
are poor, are impoverished. It shouldn't matter their status. Once you are a student in St. Vincent and Grenadines, you ought to be given equitable access to all of the resources that other students have access to. You're supposed to be given the same types of treatment, not only in terms of access to syllabi and curriculum and the best teachers, but I think also the physical plant and infrastructure. I mean, some of the schools that I've visited in St. Vincent are really in a terrible state insofar as the infrastructure is concerned. Their teaching capabilities are very limited as well. But I think even further than that, how could we expect our students to perform well if it is that something as basic as having food, having proper shelter, having the support system which they need is not in place? And so I think those foundational issues have to, and they have often been overlooked, but they certainly need to be addressed before we can really say that our education system is making the type of impact that it is intended to make. I think too often many of our students are left behind. They fall through the cracks. Sometimes it is because of personal lack of ambition, apathy, lack of drive, etc., etc. But I think oftentimes too, I think it's systemic. I think that many of the students around simply don't have the support systems, don't have the resources, don't have what it takes in terms of the provision of basic necessities to be able to do well. So I think we've made good progress, but I think there's a long way to go.
A long way to go. What do you think are some of the contributing factors to there not being equity in the education system?
Well, I mean, I think fundamentally, in almost all aspects of society, there are inequities. That's just the reality. It's something that we have to come to terms with. The nature of capitalism and the way in which systems are set up, inevitably, we're going to have inequities. But I think that there is, in some ways, a lack of deliberateness in terms of targeting those schools, those institutions that have traditionally been underrepresented, those schools that traditionally haven't had adequate access to resources. I think there's a need fundamentally to address the concerns which teachers express very often in these schools. one of the practices that I've seen happen quite a lot in many of our schools is that the good teachers are often taken from the so-called weak schools and they're brought to the so-called stronger schools. And so invariably, therefore, when you have good teachers with already strong students, it is a recipe for success. So I think there
Mm-hmm.
needs to be more equitable distribution of teaching resources to make sure that we have the very best skilled teachers across the different schools. Also, I do think that there is need to ensure that you don't have schools that are littered with students who are necessarily of the same rank. I think having a nice balance of students from all backgrounds, students who have
Mm-hmm.
different abilities, really does help because students are motivated by competition oftentimes. They see others doing well, they want to succeed equally. And so I think that if we have a more equitable distribution of students from different backgrounds, different statuses, educational statuses in terms of abilities among the
Mm-hmm.
schools, that may go some way in leveling the playing field. But I don't think that the playing field is quite level yet. But I also do question: do we actually, as a society, want to level that playing field? Because we're comfortable in saying that this is my alma mater. This is a school that I went to. I support this school. I put my money into it, etc., etc. Um, are we willing to get out of that space where we see all schools as equally important, all students as equally important, and therefore are in need of the same types of resources? So if Mandarin is introduced at one school, why not every other school? You know, what makes one school more special over the other?
You're gonna open a can of worms there, man.
Yeah,
As you mentioned that, right? I feel as though that you are targeting secondary schools. I feel as though you are touching on elitism as well. Do you think that that's something that we should get
yes,
rid of? You speak about equitable contribution, and a basic spread out of the resources across the entire country, as
yes,
opposed to just it being streamlined to a certain set of schools. But
yes,
you've
absolutely.
also
I think,
mentioned.
yeah.
Mhm, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the point that you raised about elitism is a really sort of interesting one. It is a real one in St. Vincent. There's no doubt that students who go to the top schools, students who know that they're supported, who know that they have a history behind them of 100 years of excellence at their schools, they really hone in on those realities and they try to live up to the expectations compared to other students who don't go to as popular schools. Of course, there will be a couple of them from those schools who will go on to do well. But I think by and large,
Hmm.
the elitism exists and the inequities exist. And certainly, in my own experience, I've seen that, going to community college after going to St. Martin's, how different the experiences that I had were compared to students who went to, let's say, a grammar school or high school. Oftentimes, I felt that they were better equipped. They had more experience, more engagement, more networks than I did. But certainly, what I did feel as well was that once we were on a level playing field, it gave me the opportunity to really compete with them and to do equally as well as they did. Um, you know, so I do feel that that level playing field can really be transformative in its potential.
Interesting, interesting. And as you mentioned, level playing field, your success at the ELevel College, you are a former national scholar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
How,
that
how
is
did that
probably one of
how
my
did that
biggest
experience feel?
achievements.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, how did that feel? I mean, do you think that that was achievable? Do you think that you would have been in that position, knowing that you were running around stoning mango or climbing mango tree, walking from Kingstown to Diamond at times?
Yeah.
Do you think that that would have been you at that point?
Uh, Not at all. Not at all. I mean, even the very prospect of getting to community college was a huge challenge in of itself because I think they required like 230 or $250 to enter to be admitted into college as the admission fee, the registration fee. And I think part of the challenge was that I just never had the money at the time. And what I did, therefore, recognizing that I may not make it to college, was that I interviewed for a radio station for an announcer position. Uh, I never heard back from the radio station, frankly speaking.
Wait a minute, you
It's
what?
kind of reflecting.
You applied to be an announcer?
Yeah, I did. I was fascinated by radio. I was fascinated by the idea of communicating to the public. And I did apply because I didn't see myself going to the community college, principally because I didn't have the money. And just the day before the application deadline closed, one of my church brothers, Cleophas Glynn, I asked, whether or not he could assist, and he did. And so that was the only reason why I got into community college. Interestingly, also, I never got maths for CXE, and math was a requirement for computer science. And I got into computer science, and I was saying to myself, how are all of these things kind of working out when I didn't envisage that they would? It was a requirement for psychology, but I got into psychology. But that's a separate story because for psychology, I started it in my year two. So I did 2 years in 1 year
Wow.
at community college. So I
Hmm.
started out doing law, computer science, and sociology. And then I picked up psychology in my second year, as well as Caribbean studies. And I think in first year I did communication studies. Now, thankfully, by the end of the 2 years, by God's grace, I was able to get 3 A's for Cambridge A levels and 4 1s for Cape A levels. And so for me, that was phenomenal. I mean, the idea that my overall average would have been close to 90 is phenomenal because I never had books. I had to photocopy Miss Smith's books and other teachers' books. I never had internet access and any of these things that other people tend to have. But I think once you are committed, once you are driven, once you're focused, once you believe in yourself, once you believe in God, and you have faith that you can actually do well, it is possible. And I am the living proof that it is possible.
Very good, very good. One thing though, are you using a phone or a laptop?
A laptop.
Oh, okay. I think every time the laptop shakes,
Oh, right, right.
oh, we get a little bit of a feedback. So
Oh,
I don't
not
know
at
what you
all.
could do to like just hold it in place there. How
Yeah.
much of an impact do you see? I want you to create a link between sports and education. You said you would have been integrally involved. You would have been a sort of track star and you would have been involved in cricket as well. I mean, even going as far as writing a book on cricket. All right. How do you draw the connection between sports and education? Do you think that that is a fundamental in achieving educational academical success?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will always encourage people, if you are sporting inclined, that you use every opportunity, even at the amateur level, to do well in sport. Because sport fundamentally creates the opportunity for not only scholarships, certainly many of my scholarships that I subsequently got was on account of the fact that I had a nice balance of academics and sport as well. But also, it creates balance. The exercise is physically and mentally good for you, I believe. And in addition to that, it helps you to identify, recognize your potential, and that translates into confidence. And I think once sports give you the kind of confidence that you get from it when you start winning and so forth, you then translate that confidence into your academic outcomes, and then you start seeing an improved performance in your academic performance. Oftentimes, people see that there's a disconnect, so they want to focus almost exclusively on education or exclusively on sport. I think neither of those are healthy. If, as I said, you are inclined athletic wise, that you should use whatever opportunities that present themselves because you may never know. You may be the next star. But even if you're not a star, I mean, I didn't go on to play for West Indies. I didn't go on to be a Usain Bolt. But now I introduced sports law when I was at Mona in 2015. I brought it to KFL. It is at St. Augustine now. So every year, 150 students do sports law. They use my textbook as the leading textbook in the Caribbean on sports law. I'm a commissioner for the Commonwealth Games Federation Ethics Commission. I'm on the disciplinary panel of the Windward Islands Cricket Board. And simply because I had an interest in sport and I chose to exploit it, I chose to use it. And, it goes back to that point that oftentimes, parents would make that if you have talents, if you, even if they're not great, even if they're amateur, use them. Otherwise, you're going to lose your talents.
Very much so. I mean, a lot of people believe that just because you are interested in sports, just because you run, that the only thing that you can do within a sporting field is a physical thing. So you run well, so that means you have to be a track star. You
No.
play cricket well, that means you have to be on West Indies cricket team. But there are a ton load of other opportunities that are available within each sport and discipline. I know some parents as well, some children might love a sport or an extracurricular activity so much that their parents they might impact or cut down on the academical time, and some parents might just want to cut that out completely. That happens a lot. What advice do you have for parents?
I'd say that balance is important. It's important for mental health, it is important for physical health, and it is important for overall academic and professional success. So if you realize that your child is inclined academically, but also has the ability to perform in various sporting disciplines, or even one sporting discipline, or even involved in other extracurricular activities, so students' council, youth council, sociology club, history club, heritage, whatever it is, encourage them, let them know that you support them, that you encourage them to participate, and to make the very best use of their skill set, because these things add to your repertoire, they add to your CV, and oftentimes later on when you're applying for jobs, when you're applying for university scholarships and so forth, they reflect the examiners on these things, and oftentimes people are chosen simply because they have maintained a nice balance between these competing interests. And it shows time management skills. When you're able to do well in sport, do well in academics, it shows that you have managed to master your time. You've shown interest in community development, and oftentimes that is looked at very favorably by recruiters.
Very nice, very nice. Some really wise words there. I would like you to share some advice to our students. There are some children who are going through a very tough period at this time, and they might have heard of what you went through and some of the challenges, might be feeling a little demotivated. Perhaps they, like you would have experienced, may not have had a parent around, may have had a parent with a disability, might be in very similar circumstances. What advice do you have for that student?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's the same advice that I have given myself in the past and that I
Mhm.
give myself now when I feel demotivated. Uh, Commitment, dedication, hard work, it brings success. Focus on the process. A lot of us oftentimes focus on the outcome. So we want cars, we want houses, we want X, we want Y and Z, but we're not prepared to go through the process, the hard work, the discipline that it takes to get to that stage. And I'd say certainly if you focus on the process, focus on getting it right, focus on doing your best every day, challenging yourself to think beyond the limits that have been placed around you or on you. It is possible. It is achievable. We are a society that is built on Christian values, among other things. Tap into your faith. You may not always get it right. You may not be the role model, the model citizen, but you try. You try every day to be the very best version of yourself. And eventually things come together. It doesn't mean that you will have all that you want. It doesn't mean that you will succeed in every department, but it is being confident in yourself that at the end of the day, when you close your eyes at night, that you have done your best. That is what counts, having done your best. And I always tell students this, even my own students know, that I'm not expecting perfection. What I'm expecting is that you do your best. And once you've done your best and you're convinced within yourself that you've done your best, that's all you can ask for.
All right, lovely. Jason, I'm gonna ask you something a little personal. Permit me to do that at this time.
Right.
All right. You mentioned earlier, the first part of the interview, right, that you never met your father, never knew him. You all you know is that he's overseas. Do you know
Yeah.
if he's alive or dead?
Yeah, I mean, he's alive. I mean, he has family and all of that. Clearly, I've come to terms with the fact that there are people, there are men in particular, who are not inclined to be fathers, don't want to be fathers, have never
Mm.
wanted to be fathers, or don't want to be father to particular children that they might have. So men are very selective, oftentimes, Caribbean societies. It is not an excuse, of course, for his indiscretion, but certainly you have to get to a point where you forgive, where you let go, where you come to terms with the reality, and you appreciate that you can succeed even though you don't have all things working in your favor, like having a father around. But I think also it's a call, for I think a serious
Hold the
clarion
laptop,
call
hold the
for,
laptop. Mhm.
yeah, a serious clarion call, I think, for fathers in, the Vincentian society and the Caribbean society. It's not okay. It is not okay to sleep around, have multiple children, and then to leave the children without appropriate support. It is not okay. Um, I think we've, for too long, used the excuse of, okay, it's happened as a matter of tradition. The woman will step in nonetheless and be the sort of parental figure, both mother and father. And I think that is one way in which we have deceived ourselves in believing that somehow women can perform the role of men as fathers, as well as their own role as mothers. Men as fathers offer a very different set of aptitudes and skill sets and so forth compared to women. And as much as women do try, that void still exists. I mean, even now, I still feel the void of not having a father around, particularly when you want to discuss certain issues, among other things. And, when I was getting married, for example, I really felt that void, of not having a father around to discuss my fears and among other things. But I
Mhm.
think for the men around, certainly young men in particular, people who have children, I think it's not too late. I think oftentimes men think that it's too late to intervene. In my mother's case, she hadn't met her father for 48 years. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he contacted her. And she got to spend the remaining years of his life with him in the BVI. She was there for his funeral, among other things. So it is not too late. So I very much encourage men to take the responsibility of fatherhood seriously, and certainly to be my friend. If you're a man and you have children, you have to be taking care of your children. I can't be friends with somebody who doesn't take care of your children. That's fundamental. And certainly, I think for me, it has created a passion, a strong desire to be a father. And certainly, when I do have children in the near future, I'm going to be the very best father possible. So I may have lost out
Oh,
in
there,
having.
Jason. I can't even comment on that at all with no encouragement whatsoever. But all the best there. Something you said though, you would encourage fathers, it's not too late. Is that an appeal to your own father?
I think, I suppose in some way, but
Yeah,
I'm at
let's be
least.
real and honest. Is this a difficult conversation to have?
Yes, I mean it's never easy, coming to
Okay.
terms with the fact that
Yeah.
you haven't had an important place in somebody else's life who should have fathered you. That
Hmm.
is never easy. I think I've had those difficult conversations with myself many years ago. In fact, I went to therapy to deal with it. So no, I'm at peace. No, I'm okay. No, I'm forward looking. I'm progressive in terms of my thinking about my own children in the future.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it's just one of those things, you never quite lose that void that you have when a father's not around. I mean, the basic things, including, not just the financial support, back in the day when you actually needed it, but, that familial support when you're participating in various types of activities, especially sporting events. You kind of want to have your parents or your father in particular, supporting you. And oftentimes when you see others with that and you haven't had that experience, it is quite difficult to reconcile in your mind.
If your father were to message you after this interview, what would you say to him?
Hi. Yeah, I mean, I
Would
don't
you
have
call him
animosity.
daddy? Would you call him dad?
Not, no, not particularly. I mean, I don't call my mom
Okay.
I mean, mom, but for other reasons, obviously. But but certainly, I don't have any animosity. I think that's a good place to get.
Yeah, it is, and it is a very difficult place to get to because
Yeah,
there are some people who would choose, and I know that for some time there's been this little meme going around on social media with two guys who are sitting on the corner of a block. One has a jacket and tie, and one looks like he's homeless, and both of them grew up fatherless. And
yeah,
at the end of the day, it was their individual choices. And I mean, it was the same father they were talking about, but one chose to be better and
yeah,
one chose to just accept and not do anything about it. And here's a prime example of somebody who has chosen to do better. And I really hope that persons would take that and run with it for positive reasons. Many times people get up and run with a lot of the negative stories and the comments and what's not. But these are things that a lot of men, especially, don't like to talk about. And it is something that is quite prevalent in our society. So I thank you very much. You said it was a difficult conversation to have. Thank you for sharing that with us and our
of course.
listeners.
Indeed,
All
no,
right.
it's really
All right.
my
Thank you.
pleasure.
So we're going to wrap things up now. And I want to thank you so very much for taking the time out to come and talk to us about a couple things. Um, So I think there are three things that really stood out to me. One, where you came from and how you did not use that as a limiting factor to where you are today. Two, the fact that you were able to overcome not having your father around, the poverty and all the things that would have been working against you and that work against some people, as they would use as an excuse to not achieve success. And three, your views on education and sports and how they could actually help students to succeed. I really hope that our students are able to take out from this interview, take out from what you have shared from your personal experience and use that to their benefit. All right. Any final words?
No, just to encourage, those who are listening, particularly people who feel disenfranchised, people who feel that they're a bit of outcast, people who feel that they don't have the potential, that it's not worth it, to keep trying, to continue to give your best, to continue to have faith, continue to be disciplined, and ultimately things are going to work out. I mean, it may not necessarily work out in the way in which you envisage, but they do. So just keep at it, and the Vincentian population, I think, has tremendous talent, tremendous skill, but I think we have a long way to go to maximize those potentials, maximize those skills. But I think in future we're going to see a transformed Vincentian society with people like myself coming back eventually to contribute positively to the state's development.
All right. I like that you mentioned coming back there. We don't want
Eventually.
to have another situation of brain drain. People who are so highly educated and have all these opportunities for change and all these wonderful ideas, especially young people. Hopefully, you'll come back eventually and have some sort of positive impact. All right.
Indeed.
Jason, all the very best in your future endeavors. All the very best in your
Yes.
future father.
Working on it,
There, I
Crystal. Working on it.
don't need to know. I don't need to know about that. A little too much information. Your wife is gonna be so upset with you. All right, thank you so much, Jason. Have a wonderful
Thank
day. All
you.
right.
All right. You have a
All
wonderful
right.
one. Take care. All right.
All
Bye.
right. See you soon. All right. Bye bye.